Tonight's share is always Lilu Nishmat Avi Marido Ber Mer Ben Numan Halevi Imi Marati Rachel Bat Harav Michael. And this Shabbat we have the privilege of reading what to me is one of the most challenging parshat of the Torah, parshat Chukat. I think virtually everything we read in this parsha is almost challenges our understanding of how we are to approach figuring out what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us and what are the lessons, and there are numerous lessons, but we're going to focus today on Mei Meriva, which is, again, one of the most interesting stories. It's a story we're all familiar with, and it seems, at least according to the Torah, way the Torah seems to imply, as well as most of the Parshanim, it is the incident that causes Moshe to lose the privilege of being able to lead Am Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael. So without further ado, we're going to go to chapter 20 of Sefer Bamidbar. We're going to learn the first 13 psukim, and then we're going to try to look at how Dan Yitzchak Abarbanel, 16th, 15th, and 16th century Spanish, Portuguese, Italian. No, he's primarily Spanish, but he ends up moving around after all, getting thrown out of Spain and other places, and ultimately ends up in Italy. But we'll see what he has to say about this whole episode. So, Vayavo b'nei Yisrael, Kol Hoida Midbartzin b'chodesh harishon. We're in chapter 20 in Bamidbar, verse 1. All of Bnei Yisrael. Now it's interesting because it's Bnei Yisrael, and then it says Kol Hoida. The entire congregation came to Midbartzin in the first month. Doesn't tell us what year it is, but the Parshanim are going to tell us that this was year number 40 from the time they've left Egypt. Vayeshev ha'am b'Kadesh, the people dwelt in Kadesh. This is not to be confused with the Kadesh that we read about, where the Meraglim are sent from, which is a different Kadesh, two different places called Kadesh. Vatomot sham Miriam died there, Vatikavar sham, and she was buried there. There was no water for the congregation. And they congregated on Moshe Aaron upon Moshe and Aaron. Moshe, and the people had a dispute with Moshe. And they said to him the following: Halavai, that we had died the way our brothers died before Hashem. Why have you brought the congregation of Hashem to this desert? Lamusham, for us to die here, and us and our flocks. And why have you taken us out of Egypt, to bring us to this terrible place? It's not a place where we can plant seed. Duteina, Begefen, Verimon, figs and vines and pomegranate trees are not here. And there's no water to drink. And Moshe and Aaron went before the congregation to the entrance of the tabernacle. And they bowed on their faces. And the presence of the glory of God appeared upon them. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, take the staff, and collect the congregation, you and your brother Aaron, and you should speak to the rock in front of their eyes, and it will give forth its water. And it will bring forth for them water, or you should bring forth for them water from the rock, this rock. And you'll be able to give the congregation to drink as well as their flocks. Moshe took the staff from before God, kasher tivo, as he was commanded. And they congregated. Moshe the congregation to the face of the Zelah. Alan, can you please mute? Thank you. And he said to them, Shimuno hamorim, listen ye rebels. Hamin hazela hazeh, is it possible from this rock notila chamayim that we can bring forth water for you? Vayaram Moshe et Yado, Moshe raised his hand, Vayach et Hasel, and he struck the rock, B'mateu Pamayim, with his staff twice. Vayetzu Mayim Rabim, and much water exited. Vayetesh Toido Biram, and all of the congregation and their flocks drank. Vayomer Hashem Moshe v'Aaron. Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron, Yan lo hemantem bi, since you did not have faith in me, lahakdisheni, to sanctify me, leinei bnei Yisrael, in the eyes of the children of Israel, lachein, therefore, lo taviu et hakol hazeh, you will not bring this congregation to the land that I have given them. Hema, this episode is Mem Rivah, the waters of strife. Asher ravu bnei Yisrael Hashem, that bnei Yisrael disputed with Hashem by Yikadesh Bam, and they were sanctified through them. Again, before I start, also want to notice that this concept of Mem Rivah shows up other times in the Torah, specifically in the context of the death of Aaron and in the context of the death of Moshe. And interestingly enough, we have a number of different phrases that describe how Hashem looked at what Moshe and Aaron did. It says first, lo hemantem bi, you did not have faith in me. Later on, when Aaron dies, it says asher meritam et pi, because you rebelled against my word. And similar language is used when Hashem tells Moshe that he has to die. In parshat Pinchas, it says meritam pi. Again, this concept of meritam, of you rebelled against me. However, in parshat Ha'azino, it says asher ma'altam bi, which you trespassed against me. And it also says al asher lo kidashtem osi, you did not sanctify me. So we have all these different phraseologies of what Moshe and Aaron did. Now, we're all familiar with Rashi's commentary, who says one thing, and there are a number of other commentators say other. We're going to go to Abarbanel, and he's going to list 10 different commentaries and 10 different interpretations that are given by 10 different commentators, and is going to dismiss them all and come up with his own interpretation. So away we go. Hope we're going to get through all this, because it's got a lot to say about Abarbanel. Okay, so first, as Abarbanel is one of the most interesting things about learning Abarbanel is he begins every section with a number of questions that he feels the text raises. And he presents them very clearly so that we can understand what it is about the text that is bothering him. So let's start with his question. Question number one. Lama nigzar al Moshe ve'Aaron shelo yavo al haaretz. Why was this decree against Moshe and Aaron so severe that they were not going to enter Eretz Yisrael? Ki bein sheyechatam, no matter whether I think their sin was shehikwet asela, that they hit the rock instead of talking to the rock. Or perhaps they misled Am Yisrael by saying, listen, you rebels. Or any of the other possibilities that are raised, according to the different interpretations, for this sin, it seems a very trivial sin, and it seems to be a very, very severe punishment for such a, quote, trivial sin for these two great leaders. We understand if Hashem was punishing them for some great transgression, it's not for this light sin, which seems to be almost not trivial, but not as severe a sin as that to warrant such a severe punishment. According to all of the different interpretations, it wasn't that significant, severe a sin that it should warrant such a severe punishment. The Gadol mizeh, because it seems to me, at least the Abarbanel says, greater sins Moshe committed shmir haluchot. He took God's handiwork, the tablets, and smashed them. Why wouldn't he be punished for that? And when he complains to God in Parshat Balotcha, where he says when God says, I'm going to give them meat for 30 days, he says, how are you going to give meat? You're going to kill all the cattle? So again, when he complains there, he says, I just get rid of me. I've had it, God. That would seem to us to be a much greater transgression than hitting the rock instead of speaking to the rock. Second question. Hinei bibidotav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu latet onesh mida keneged mida kefi hachet umityaches elav. that we know that when Hashem sends a punishment, it's not so much a punishment that is arbitrarily chosen. It is always a punishment that is measure for measure against what the sin was. As the pasuk in Tehillim says, Shem, your kindness is that you repay each person according to his deeds. So the punishment always is suitable for whatever the sin was. Why does that have to pay? What is Tehillim saying by saying that? Because through that, through that, people understand that God didn't just arbitrarily give an arbitrary punishment and it's proper judgment. That's how we know when a person is punished, midah keneged midah. V'hu b'inyan meim riva, ein ha'onesh anita Moshe v'Aaron mityaches, ki ma hayachas shesh el hakat hasela o diburo im ha'avara el ha'aretz o lidvarav v'cha'asu v'hefrei t'vukoso ad shalo yavo shama. In any case, whatever the sin was, it doesn't seem to fit the punishment that they can't go into Eretz Yisrael. Question number 3. Hine, Moshe he caught Tzur. Okay, let's say even agree that Moshe hit the rock. Oh, diber la'am v'nikais, or he spoke to the nation in an angry tone and got upset. Shelo karoi, which was inappropriate, as we'll see later. That's one of the Rambam's opinions. Nikabel shahayaroi shinatan lo onesh. Okay, so even if we say that Moshe was deserving of punishment and then he got an appropriate punishment, aval Aaron lama yumas. What did Aaron do? Ma'asa. Moshe is the one who's doing everything. Why did Aaron get punished? Kihu lo hika. He didn't hit the rock. Ela Moshe was the one who hit the rock. V'hu lo amar shimunu amarim. He didn't say anything to the people. Ela Moshe. Aaron didn't even have to be there. Aaron is almost there as the silent partner to Moshe, or silent. He's standing by, and Moshe is leading the whole show. Why does he get punished? Why does Hashem join him together with Moshe? Why is Aaron being punished for what Moshe did? So again, very, very powerful question. Sheila Dalit, 4th question. The Moshe Amar b'Mishnah Torah in Sefer Dvarim, when Moshe is reviewing the different things that happened to Am Yisrael during the 40 years, he says, "Gam bi hitanaf Hashem biglalchem leimor gam atalo tov Hashem." In one place, he says that Hashem was angry at me because of you, for your sake, and he told me you're not going to be able to enter Eretz Yisrael. Now, this is in the context of the Meraglim, as we'll see in a minute. The Omer later says, Hashem got angry at me because of your words. Which seems to imply, if we look in Dvarim, Moshe includes that when he's talking about the Ched of the Meraglim, he says, oh, by the way, Hashem also got angry at me and wouldn't let me go into Eretz Yisrael either. The Eino Cain, he was not part of the Ched of the Meraglim, so why is he saying Hashem got angry at him, including it in with the story of the Ched of Meraglim? Beit Binyan Meim Riva. Gam Shlo Nemar Kazeba Aaron Shinat Ashitanaf Al Divrayam. Moshe. It also doesn't say anything there about Hashem getting angry at Aaron. No mention whatsoever in Sefer Dvarim Hashem getting angry about Aaron. The Meitu Shneim Bavon Echad. If they both died for the same sin, well, how are they exchanged? Why? What's going on? Why does it mention Moshe, not mention Aaron at all? Question number 5. Lama Moshe v'Aaron lo tzach libam el Hashem migodel ha'onesh im kolot ha'chet. Why don't Moshe and Aaron daven to Hashem and say, wait a minute, is this really a fair punishment? That's really not fair. And we know that Moshe later on, he will tell the Am Yisrael that he davened to Hashem. The only reason Moshe davened to Hashem there was this was after the conquest of Sichon and Og. Moshe thought, okay, the Gezerah is finished because I've already started the conquest of Eretz Yisrael. When he saw that war, he felt Hashem had already rescinded his punishment, and that's why, but he davened to see at the time the decree, Hashem says to him that he's not going to be able to go into Eretz Yisrael. And when Aaron dies, some yad lepeh. He literally, Moshe put his mouth over his hand. Neither Moshe or Aaron. We don't see anything about them davening to Hashem and saying, "Wait, is this really a fair punishment?" We know that Chet HaEgel, Moshe davens to Hashem. Chet of the Meraglim, Moshe davens to Hashem. Bnei Yisrael sin, Moshe davens to Hashem. We're going to see it later on in this week's parsha with the Nechashim that Moshe is going to daven to Hashem. How come when it comes to his own punishment, he doesn't even daven to Hashem, or his brother's punishment, he doesn't daven to Hashem? Question number 6. Sheila Havav. Lama zenishtana inyan otzad hamayim min hasela sheniskar kan. Why did Hashem give him different instructions here than he gave him 40 years ago when they didn't have water back in Parshat Beshalach? What's going on? Why are there all these changes? What are the changes? He's going to list a bunch of differences between this no water story with a rock and that no water story with a rock. The first difference is there he tells Moshe, go in front of the people and take the elders with you. Here the elders, not even part of the story. That's difference number 1. Difference number 2. There we know Hashem told Moshe, hit the rock. Here he says, speak to the rock. What's the difference? Why in one case is he told hit the rock, in the other case he's told to speak to the rock? Hagimel, third question. Shesham karu tzur, v'omrinim olech ala tzur b'chorev, v'kan karu sela, v'lomer shiyamod lefanav. Over there, the rock is called a tzur. And Hashem tells them that you'll see, when you get to this tzur, when you get to this place where I'm going to give you water, you'll be able to see my presence. Here, Hashem doesn't say anything about his presence being present, and it's not called a tzur, it's called a sela. Okay? Hadalid, number 4. Shesham kar Hashem called Masa Meriva, and Kankro Meriva bilvad lo Masa lo Shem Nisayon. There's no testing. There's just a Meriva, just a dispute. Over there it was Masa Meriva. Here it's just Me Meriva. Okay. Shela Zayin, question number 7. Lama ba b'parsha zot u'sh'ar mekamot sheniskar Shem sham zeh inyan dal lishonot me'em b'lashon mechayev. I'm sorry, dal lishonot. Why does Hashem use 4 different expressions to describe what they did wrong? Mehem b'lashon mechiyav. Some they acted inappropriately. By Maritam P, they rebelled against me. Maltam B, you transgressed or transgressed. Ushnaim b'lashon sholel, and 2 in negative. Lo kidashtem, you didn't sanctify me. Lo amantim, you didn't have faith in me. How is it possible to say that the head of the Nevi'im, the master of the Nevi'im, Moshe Rabbeinu Shalom, Mara Umal, that he rebelled against Hashem, he transgressed, Lo Hemid, he didn't believe, Lo Kiddush, Hashem Anefat. How can we believe all these 4 things about Moshe? It doesn't seem to make sense, Abarbanel says. Okay, so now he's going to explain it all. Okay, Zachar HaKosav, the story begins Shabo Kaladas Yisrael Midbar, that they all reached a place called Midbar Tzin. The Ein Safek Shayakol Zacharei Shemetu Kol Anshe HaMidbar. There's no doubt that this whole story happens after the entire generation has passed away. The previous generation is gone. 40 years have passed. The decree is over for those that are going to die. They're all died, dead, and we're going to move on. V'nisharu b'neihem, and their children were left. Hatidim likones laretz. So the entire congregation is now literally on the threshold of entering Eretz Yisrael. Finally, after 40 years of waiting. Vayeshivam b'kadesh, and the people stopped at Kadesh. V'tamash sham Miriam v'tikaver sham, and Miriam dies there. So the pasuk tells us that Miriam dies. The ain Kadesh zeh Kadesh Barnea sheshalchu misham maraglim. This Kadesh is not the same as Kadesh Barnea from where the Meraglim were sent. As we read in Sefer Dvarim, in Parshat Dvarim, that Kadesh was where they stayed for a long period of time. That was Kadesh Barnea, and then they traveled through the desert, and now they reached this next Kadesh. Because the Kadesh where they sent the Meraglim from was in Midbar Paran, like Ibn Ezra mentions, that these are 2 different Kadesh. Avol Kadesh Zeh, Humakom Acher b'Midbar Tzin. It's another place. It's in Midbar Tzin. Shabo Sham Mishnat HaArbaim. They got there in the 40th year. What does this verse come to teach us? Shebiyamim mu'atim. It was a very, very short period of time. Meitu Aaron and Miriam Megam Moshe. Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, all three die within the same calendar year. Well, it's the same 12-month period. Okay, yeah, it's actually the same calendar year if you count from Nisan, not if we count from Tishrei. Okay. The Navi says that I took away the three shepherds of Am Yisrael in 1 month. Not literally in 1 month, but almost seemed like 1 month because they all went in the same year. The Gamlo Dia, and also to tell us, Shebekadesh Barnea, Haitat Teluna, Ugzerat Nisa Ledora Meraglim, Shavlo Yavor La'aretz. So there was a Gezerah in the first Kadesh where we read about, which was Kadesh Barnea, where they sent the Meraglim, and there Hashem decreed that the entire generation was not going to enter the Eretz Yisrael. In this Kadesh, there was another Gezerah, and this is where it was decreed that Moshe and Aaron would not enter Eretz Yisrael. It's as if to remind us that it was a Kadesh where Hashem got angry at Al Am Yisrael. And it appears the words of our Chazal, Shema Emet B'lisafek Shabi Mei Miriam Ubizachuta Hayaholech Im Yisrael B'derech Pela Be'er Mayim Chayim. Now it appears, our Barbanel says, if we look in the Midrash, it seems to say that it's no doubt that all of Miriam's life, from the time they left Egypt, from the time they entered the desert until they got here, in the merit of Miriam, there was a well that literally went with Am Yisrael and traveled with them. As we know, call it Be'er Miriam. Ki b'chol makom shayuchonim hayanovea be'er mayim chayim al dav hapela kasher meita tzedekah zeh pasach habe'er. Every place they would camp, there would be a well that would miraculously appear, and when she died, the well left. The Diber HaKatsuv, and the reason this story is how the story begins with the death of Miriam, because the pasuk is telling us that Am Yisrael really didn't do a good job here. They messed up. Diber Yisrael Shal Yisrael, this is not a good story for Am Yisrael. Why? At the time when Am Yisrael should have been involved in coming and giving comfort to Aaron and Moshe, they just lost their beloved sister who's been leading them on the way. We read about her when they crossed Yam Suf. Clearly Moshe had a connection to her because she's the one who saved them in the first place in the river. So clearly this was a rather traumatic, not necessarily traumatic, but certainly a sad experience for them to lose their sister. And Am Yisrael, instead of coming and giving them nechama and daying a shiva call, they gather and start complaining, and not to comfort them. And that's why the Torah begins, the parshat beginning, the second pasuk says, Moshe. They complained to Moshe. Even though they really come and congregate al Moshe Aaron, it mentions Moshe first, obviously because he's the leader. But nonetheless, their whole response to Miriam's death was totally, completely inappropriate. And that's what the pasuk wants to emphasize and focus us on here. That Am Yisrael, instead of thinking about, wait a minute, Moshe and Aaron's sister just died, we should be menachem avo, they come and complain about the fact that there's no water. Now this was their complaint. We read it. Halavai that we had died like our brothers died before Hashem. Ratzalomar. What did they mean? Halavai shayinu meitim k'moshe meitu achinu al ha'egel v'al ha'meraglim v'adat korach. Halavai we died for the chet egel or the chet of the meraglim or with korach for rebellion. V'lo shenamut b'chet u'pesha k'moshe meitu l'fnei Elohim. And not that we should die for some other sin that like they died. Why should we? Why do we want to die like that? Ella sheyinu meitim k'moshe meitu heim. We would have died just like they died. At least if we died like that, we die now, we die serving Hashem. But why did they suddenly decide, well, we want to die? Why didn't you bring us to this desert where we're all going to die? Rotzalomar is to say, what do they mean by saying that? They should have traveled a different road. There were plenty of ways to get from Egypt to Israel. They didn't have to go through the desert. They could have gone a different way. Could have built boats and gone by the Mediterranean. They could have walked across and gone up the coast. Why did he have to take them through the desert? Okay, we know that in Parshat Vayishlach it says Hashem didn't want them to go through Eretz Plishtim because they were going to fight. They was going to see a war and they'd run back to Egypt. So then, okay, so now you have a reason why we didn't go that way. But after Paro threw us out, after Egypt was destroyed, we could have stayed there and lived in Egypt, right? We didn't have to leave. We could have gotten the Torah, gone to Har Sinai, and then go back to Egypt and live there. Why do we have to go to this place called Eretz Canaan? I can live anywhere and serve Hashem. I don't have to live only in Eretz Yisrael. That's what they were saying. However, that's why they didn't start with Hashem took us out of Egypt. They started with only after. Why did you bring us to this place? But Hashem was not angry at them for saying these words. They really wanted to die in the service of Hashem, and that's why Hashem was not angry at them. That's what Abarbanel wants to say. So that Hashem was not angry at them. We also, other Parshatim say Hashem is not angry at them for requesting water, because water is a legitimate request. We saw that back in Parshat Vayishlach. When they request water, Hashem is okay with that. He understands that you need water to survive. They're human beings. Okay. So continuing, when Moshe and Aaron when they saw the people are now complaining about that they left Egypt and that all the people died, or the whole generation that died out, Yaru linafsham, they were afraid, they were physically afraid that they were going to kill him. Shema yiskalum bavanim, that they're going to start throwing stones at him. But they weren't running away. I'm sorry, and that's why they wanted to get out of the line of fire. They came to the Mishkan and they bowed in tefillah to ask Hashem, what are we supposed to do? The Moshe. Hashem speaks to Moshe. Shikachet hamateh. He should take the staff. Now, it's interesting because if we go through the Parshanim, we will find those that say, which staff is he supposed to take? Most people automatically think, what staff does Moshe take when he goes into, what Hashem says, take the staff that he did all the plagues with. There are Parshanim, Chizkuni was among them, and Rashbam among them, who want to say, no, that in reality, the mateh that he's supposed to take is the mateh of Aaron that blossomed that we read about last week. But that's a whole different story. We'll get that. But Abarbanel says, no, V'mateh Moshe, Asher ba osa bo et ha'otot. That's the same one he used to perform all of the plagues and the splitting of the sea. That's the staff he's supposed to take. Shehu mateh ha'hanaga. This is the staff of leadership. Makel tif'ara, the awesome stick. Shayamevi biyado bi'itot ha'hanaga, that he would bring with him during times of leadership. Hashem says, take the stick, collect the congregation, lifnei hasela, before this rock. Shehaya Shama, that was in the desert. Uvsheshneim yedabru el hasela, and the two of them should speak to the rock, be'einei ha'ida, in front of the congregation. The yehyeh hadibur, and what they should say to him is b'shem Hashem, in the name of Hashem, al fiyatzur gamayim, that they should say to this rock that Hashem wants you to turn into to give forth water. Shetain meimav. That's what they're supposed to tell the rock. They're supposed to tell the rock, Hashem, in Hashem's name, you're supposed to give forth water. Rotzalomar, to say, Shehamayim sheivkira kadosh baruch hu l'tocho, the water that Hashem has put inside you, Mr. Rock, Latitam, al dar hapela, to give them in a miraculous fashion. The he malitza nichbedet shekefi hayacholet haloki called remoyu muchanim le'asot b'hem nes. And this is a great lesson to teach the power of Hashem, that everything is possible to do a miracle. Every tool that we have is possible to do a miracle with. Hashem can work miracles with everything. As we have a mamar in the Gemara where it tells us that Rabbi Chanina or Rabbi Hanania, I forget which one, his daughter by mistake lit the Shabbos candles with vinegar instead of with oil, and she was very, very afraid what to do. And he says, not to worry. If Hashem can make oil burn, he can make vinegar burn. Okay, so we know that Hashem can do anything, can change the natural properties of things in a miraculous fashion because Hashem created everything. That Hashem can perform a miracle and change the properties of anything. So whatever, here he has an inanimate rock, he can turn a rock into water or bring forth water from a rock. That's why what Hashem says they should say to the rock, the Natan Memav, give forth water. The water that Hashem has already prepared to come out of here in a miraculous fashion. And that's why the pasuk then says. So if you read through the pasukim, it says that he says to the Ratem El Hasela Li'Einehem, what are the words you should say to the Sela? Natan Memav, give forth your water. And then it says and through telling the rock that, it'll bring forth water, and you'll bring forth water for everybody. Even though the Sela is a hard piece of stone, he doesn't have to be hit. He doesn't have to do any other effort. Moshe doesn't have to put in any effort. Just to speak to it. Cain, of Cain. The rock will instantly listen to Hashem. And through this energy, through the strength of the rock, through the prayer, through his speech alone, Moshe will be able to bring forth water from the rock. Not only will there be enough water for everybody to drink, there'll be enough water for everybody and all their animals to drink. Because already they were close enough to a civilized area that they could buy more animals to carry their all of their possessions and their families. So they had plenty of cattle, they had plenty of animals, and Hashem tells Moshe not to worry, there'll be plenty of water. However, Moshe begins by chastising the people who were arguing with him. And he said to them, listen, you rebels. How can you give me and Aaron, or how can you blame leaving Egypt and coming to this desert, me and Aaron? We've been telling you all along, and it's clear to you by the miraculous signs that are all along the way, that this is not our choice. This is Hashem is the one who is leading us. So it's not coming from us. Why are you arguing with us for water? Look around and see. Are we going to be able? Can I give you water? I don't have water. I'm not a magician. I'm not a water maker. Only Hashem can. It's something we don't have the ability to do. After Moshe said that, he caught Hasela b'matehu. He hit the rock with his mateh. Lo pam achad bilbad ki im pamayim, not once but twice. Vayetzu mayim, and water came forth. Lahorod lahem sheyad Hashem astazod, and he hit the rock to show that the water came from Hashem, because he just said we don't have any power to bring forth water. Hashem does. Lo kochamu b'vortam shel Moshe v'Yaharon. Now, the Parshanim all want to say this is considered a sin for Moshe V'Aaron. The Nenchu alav shneim, and both of them are punished for it. The amnam, I still don't get what was the sin, what did they do wrong. So we really need to figure out what's going on here. Okay, now he's told us the whole story and what happened. Now he's going to get into what happened. Now, now he's going to go through 10 different interpretations that he's seen and doesn't like. The Omer Hadat Shadat, the following. First is the Midrash, that the one that everybody knows. What is that? Hashem told them to speak, they hit. Below Dibru, they didn't speak to the rock. If they had spoken to the rock, Hashem would have been sanctified. They would say, because they would say, if an inanimate object like a rock listens when Hashem speaks, how much more do we, who rely on Hashem for everything we need to survive, how much more do we have to follow what Hashem says? That's number one. Ramban already asked a question on this interpretation. Since Hashem told him to take a staff, what's he done with the staff every other time? He hit the earth to bring forth Makot. He hit the river to relate to play this. So Moshe obviously is thinking, I need the stick to hit the rock with. If all I'm going to do is speak to the rock, what do I need this stick for? It doesn't really matter from the perspective of the rock. It doesn't matter. There's no greater miracle by speaking to the rock and it gives forth water, or touching the rock, hitting the rock and it gives forth water. And how can Hashem say that this was me'ilah, this was a transgression upon something sanctifying? So that's number one. And he again, just like Ramban doesn't like it, Abarbanel isn't keen on Rashi's comment. The second one, Hu Chazal. This is again a midrash that says the following: Shamru shayachet keshekelu bichvodam shel Yisrael v'amru lahem shimuna hamorim. That they were light, they did not treat Am Yisrael with proper respect by saying, "Listen, you rebels." The lamdu mikan in the Chazal, the Medrash wants to learn from the Hashem zalzel bichvodat tzibur kil machal et Hashem. Somebody who does not treat the congregation respectfully is trampling on the honor of Hashem. When somebody disrespects congregation of Am Yisrael, that's the equivalent of transgressing Hashem. The problem with that is when we go through what Moshe says to Am Yisrael in Sefer Dvarim, it's a lot worse than Shimuna Amorim. He says, you've been rebels all my whole life here. If it was indeed a sin to say Shimuna Amorim, how could he later on say, so that doesn't seem to make sense. Doesn't like that interpretation. Interpretation 3. Interpretation 3 is Huarav Hagadol HaMaimoni. This is the Rambam. Shekatu, who writes, but that he got angry at Am Yisrael. We know from Kohelet that Kas is something that rests in the lap of the fools. It's a very, very terrible trait, characteristic. Certainly in the master of the Nevi'im, it's a terrible trait to get angry at people. By seeing Moshe angry, Am Yisrael would automatically think, Hashem must be angry at us, because otherwise Moshe wouldn't be angry at us. Hashem was not angry. When they ask for food and water, Hashem's okay with that. So when they start wanting luxuries like meat, that Hashem gets upset. But if all they want is food and water that they need, Hashem is okay with that. He's not upset. Ramban also has a question on this. The words that are used to describe the sin don't talk about anger. They talk about not having faith, not having sanctifying Hashem. If getting angry is a sin, why don't we have anything about mentioning Moshe's sin when he gets angry at the officers when they come back from the war at Midian for leaving all the women alive? And certainly here, where the pasuk doesn't even say that Moshe got angry. And certainly the word Shimuna Amorim don't necessarily mean he was angry. He was rebuking the people for rebelling and questioning God. So it's certainly not, that doesn't seem to make sense. Number 4, Hevi Ramban Mishposh Rabbeinu Hananel. Ramban brings the name of Rabbeinu Hananel. Behunim Shach Acharav, and the Ramban likes this pshat. Shehayachet Amram Notzi Lachem Mayim. Will we bring forth water? Yotzi Hashem Lachem Mayim. From this rock can Hashem bring forth water. Moshe Katuv, as we saw earlier in the man, when Hashem sends the man, Moshe specifically attributes it to God. He says, "B'teit Hashem lachem ba'erev basar lechol." Okay, he'll give you meat in the evening to eat, and bread in the morning. So Hashem is giving it to you. I've already answered this. This is not a great teirutz, he says, because they said, they didn't say, "Oh, we're going to bring you forth." I mean, as a statement. They said it as like, "Come on, we can't bring water from this rock." So that's why they use the word "notzi." We can, because Hashem certainly can bring forth water. So they couldn't use the word "yotzi." They didn't. Where they use the word "notzi" to say, "Are we going to bring forth water?" It's with a tamir, with a question mark. Can we bring forth water from a rock? We can't. It's a kind of question. It's a rhetorical question. Can we bring forth water? Certainly not. As we find, Eliyahu asks Achav, "You killed somebody, now you want to inherit his property." Again, the Navi asks, "I was one who appeared to your ancestor in Mitzrayim." They use notzi to say we can't bring forth water. We don't have the power to bring forth water. Only through Hashem's power. Through miracle. And similarly, Ramban says that's another way we could interpret this verse. So again, that one doesn't work. That he hit it the second time, the rock. It would be no sin if he only hit the rock once. Because that would show, okay, I hit it once, it listened, and Hashem did what it do. The Yikshal Dad Hazeh, Ezra Inyan Aaron Shlo Yikafilu Pamachad. That's fine about Moshe. Moshe should be punished for hitting a second time. Why is Aaron punished? He didn't hit it at all. So again, that answer doesn't seem to work. If he's being punished for hitting it a second time, then only Moshe should be punished, not Aaron. But that Havav number 6. Anashim Shahaya Chet Moshe Aaron Shlo Amru Shira Al Yitziat Hamayim Min Hasela. Yisrael Amru Shira. The sin of Moshe and Aaron was that they didn't thank Hashem and for the water. They didn't sing a song and say, "Oh, what a beautiful well Hashem sent us." Like Yisrael later on in the parshat, they sing the song of the Be'er. And therefore they said, you can't join Am Yisrael, come into Eretz Yisrael. If they had sung the shiur, it would have been fine. That doesn't make sense. That answer doesn't work for the very simple reason that if that's the case, all of Am Yisrael has to get punished because they didn't sing this song until much, much later in the journey. They finally get around to singing the song of the Be'er. But that has Zayin. Number 7. Another opinion. Shesavru Kamosh Katzar Avin Ibn Ezra from Ibn Ezra. Shisrael Amru Shiotziu Hamayim Misela Acher. Okay, Am Yisrael wanted them to said, "Hey, let's try this rock." And Moshe said, "Are we going to bring forth water from this rock?" Moshe pakad milachlif davar Hashem b'sela asher lo amar lo. Moshe was afraid to make water come out of the rock that Am Yisrael picked because that wasn't the one that Hashem picked. Since he could have made water come out of any rock. Hashem could make water come out of any rock. But since Moshe didn't use the rock that Am Yisrael suggested, okay, Nenshu. You didn't believe and you didn't have faith that Hashem can make water come out of any rock. That the rebellion was through the mouth. They did what Hashem commanded by going to a different rock. They didn't go against Hashem's word. So again, it doesn't make sense to Abarbanel. Number 8. Again, Dad Harab Ibn Ezra, by the way, gives a number of different interpretations. V'inyano shemoshe bekaso hapasuk hipsuk hadveikut shayalo b'shem asher bo yeaseha otot v'amoftim. That because Moshe got angry, his concentration on his closeness to Hashem, that he needed to do all these signs and wonders for Hashem, wasn't there. He wasn't with it, and that's why he couldn't. Things didn't work out. But this is kind of a collection from different interpretations. Kihu Omer, it says Moshe ben Oloshel mitoch hakas. First, it says that Moshe was angry. Kediver Rambam, like Rambam says, Chata kishalo diber. He sinned by not speaking to the rock. V'hika kedat harishon, like Rashi said. So he's kind of smushed together Rambam's part of Rambam's shot with part of Rashi's shot. Barbanel is saying. And as a result, the water didn't come out through the first hit. He had to hit it the second time. Again, he doesn't like it because it's taking pieces from different places, and he's already said all those pieces don't work. So clearly, the combination doesn't work. Version 9 is the Baal of the Yitzchak Albo Sefer Harim. That they didn't take the initiative, that instead of when the people complained they wanted water, Moshe and Aaron should have immediately taken the initiative and gone and done a miracle on their own without asking Hashem. Hashem goes around we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu fulfills the word of Nevi'im when they say something to nature. And through that, like Eliyahu does. When Eliyahu says, we're gonna have no rain, I'm gonna stop the rain. He doesn't say Hashem's gonna stop the rain. He says there's gonna be no rain. Okay? He takes the initiative because they're sinning. So here too, Moshe and Aaron, to answer what Am Yisrael needs, should have taken the initiative. That's what Bali Karim says. We have other cases. That he did not use his powers, his skills that Hashem has granted him to create a Kiddush Hashem. And by the way, Karim goes even further. He says, and because of this mistake, Yoshua realized, I can't take the initiative. I should take the initiative. And that's why when they're fighting, he says, Shem, hold up the sun, Shem. Stop. So he learned it from here. Abarbanel doesn't like this interpretation either. Back 40 years ago, when everybody was complaining about water, he didn't do that either. What did he do? He waited for Hashem's instructions. When the people come and complain for water, what does Moshe do? He waits for Hashem's instructions. That was what he did in B'Shalach, and that was the right course there. Why should it be the wrong course here? If it was a sin that he didn't take the initiative, why does Hashem come and tell him what to do? If it's indeed a sin that he doesn't take the initiative. Vadat Hayud, interpretation at number 10 that Abarbanel brings down. I've seen it in one of the people of in this generation. Moshe did not sin at all. If we find psukim that seem to describe a sin of Moshe, that Hashem was angry at me for your sake, has nothing to do with this. Because of Meim Rivah, Hashem now was what Hashem sealed it. Moshe ba'avuram, and Moshe, things went bad with Moshe ba'avuram for their sake. Basechel mora, and our intelligence seems to imply she'ish shalem kamohu lo yachet chote chalila. That Moshe was a great tzaddik. How could he sin? Ubehechrech roi nefarish hapsukim hamorim al chet'o kikein derech haksuf hamachishim zeh. When the pasuk is describing Moshe's seeming chet, it's not that Moshe sinned. Never mash amar kasuf altem meritem lo amantem lo kidashtem hem mimin mashenemar ba'achon molau b'nei Yisrael. It's similar to when one person sins in Yeshua's case, and they take from the cherem of Yericho, that's Achan, and Hashem says to Yeshua, all of Am Yisrael has sinned. The never shall chata Yisrael, all of Am Yisrael has sinned. The mavur shlo chata ela Achan, only one person sinned. And everybody gets tarred with the same brush, even though they're not included. And we have that many times throughout where Hashem is very exacting with Am Yisrael, and even if a few people sin, Hashem says everybody has sinned. If Am Yisrael is sinning by complaining about how that Hashem has taken them to a place where there's no water, clearly they're sinning. So Hashem is including Moshe and Aaron in this sin, even though they really were not part of the sin. And Moshe gets tarred with the same brush that they do. We find the same thing with the man that Hashem says to Moshe, why don't you keep it? And it turns out that there were only a couple of people who went out to see if there was man on Shabbat. Klal Moshe v'Aaron b'mamar, and includes Moshe and Aaron. You also don't believe. Because that's the way the Torah speaks. When somebody in Am Yisrael sins, Hashem says all of Am Yisrael has sinned, and he includes Moshe and Aaron. The Amnam. And therefore, this interpretation is Onesh Moshe mitato haya bavon doro. Moshe dies in the desert. Why? Because his whole generation has sinned. And since they were not worthy to enter Israel through him, you can't bring this people because it's not the same. You're the people you're the leader of. It doesn't say you can't come in. It says you can't bring them in. The reason that Moshe and Aaron have to die in the Midbar is not a punishment for Moshe and Aaron, according to this interpretation. It's a punishment for Am Yisrael, that they're not going to have these great leaders. That through them, Am Yisrael became sanctified. Because Hashem knew if Hashem would have taken Am Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael with Moshe and Aaron as their leaders, they would not have taken so long to conquer the land and divide it up. They wouldn't have left any of the the indigenous people of the land there. And there were already Marim and Chazal that said if Am Yisrael had gone into Eretz Yisrael with Moshe and Aaron as the leaders, they would have destroyed all the people, they would have inherited the land, they would have built a Beit HaMikdash, and everything would have been fine. What would have happened? The Gemara brings on why the angels asked Hashem, why did Adam Harishon have to die? Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu, Hashem said, mitzvah kalit tzivitziv lo yochal amod aleh. There was one mitzvah and he couldn't fulfill it. Amar imkein Moshe v'Aaron shekimu kol haTorah. Moshe and Aaron who fulfilled the entire Torah. Lama gazar talei mitzvah. Why did they have to die? Amar Lev Hashem answers, mikra echad latzadik v'lo rasha. Everybody who's human has to be mortal, has to die. The Humora, and this teaches this midrash, Moshe Adonenu lo chata. Moshe did not sin. Aval haya shalem v'torah so shlema. Who was full, he was complete, and his Torah was complete. But that says that gam keinenu nacha. That also doesn't make sense. This seems to directly contradict the psukim that we quoted above that say Hashem tells Moshe, because of this, of what happened in Mem Rivar, you're not going to Eretz Yisrael. Ubesof Seder Azino, in the end of Azino, Biara Torah Moshe Biara Lo Nichnas Lars V'Pnei Masha Chatu B'Meim Rivat Kadesh V'Lo Haya Zeh Onish L'Yisrael El Lahem. So that I don't like that interpretation either of Abarbanel says. Now I'm watching. I just realized that I'm running way late, so I'm going to have to I can't go through the rest of the Abarbanel, but I'm going to tell you very simply how the Abarbanel says, and I'll have to cut it down to a very quick minute. Abarbanel very simply says that Aaron and Moshe are each being punished for a different sin. Aaron is being punished for his part in Chet HaEgel, even though he did it to try to stall Am Yisrael. Moshe is being punished for his part in the Chet of the Meraglim, but because he was the one who gives the Meraglim instructions to look at the cities, look at whether they're fortified or not, and it's based on that the spies report back negatively, that leads the people to rebel. If Moshe hadn't given them all these side instructions, look at this, look at that, they might have come back and given a different report, and things might have turned out differently. So even though Moshe intended it for the right reasons, it turned out into the wrong reasons, and that's why ultimately Moshe doesn't go into Eretz Yisrael. That's Abarbanel's shot, very briefly, and I apologize that I'm running so late, but I hope you were able to glean something. I think the whole point here of Mem Rivah is that things aren't always what they seem. Whether it's how the miracle happened, what the mistake was, we don't know. As I said, we saw 10 different pshatim, and there are others, by the way, that Abarbanel doesn't bring down as to what went wrong here at Mem Rivah. But ultimately, I think that there's one thing that we have to understand is that ultimately Am Yisrael does get into Eretz Yisrael without Moshe and Aaron, and yet the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says that in reality, ultimately, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends Malach Mashiach, Moshe and Aaron will be able to once again lead all Am Yisrael who died during the 40 years back into Eretz Yisrael, and we will be zocheh to Gula Shleimim here remain. Thank you all. I hope, as I said, I apologize for going so late. Please open up for questions, comments, or feedback at this point in time. Anybody? If you have a question, make sure you unmute yourself, because I think everybody's pretty much muted. So any questions out there? Okay. Have a good evening, all. Have a good rest of the week. And in Shabbat Shalom, Be'ezer Hashem, we will see you again next week, same time. And we'll try to talk about our friends Bilam and Balak next week. Although I don't know what we'll talk about. We'll see. Have a good week. Good rest of the week. Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.